Everybody, Golden Era Bookworm here, back from my holidays, and I'd like to start off with this particular review on Frank Zane's Symmetry. Now, this book I thoroughly enjoyed reading throughout my holidays, and I can sum it up by saying that it really does look at Frank Zane's approach to bodybuilding. Really, Frank Zane's approach has to definitely be one of the most holistic approaches to bodybuilding. It's a true mind, body, soul approach to bodybuilding, and it's very well reflected in this book. I mean, Frank Zane is a very particular character in that he studied meditation, mantra, and combined it with his bodybuilding. And you can really see in this book how he used those more esoteric techniques, not just and he didn't just see bodybuilding as physical development, but he combined it with yoga, with meditation and mantra for developing his own, you could say, his own spiritual development as well. This book is out of print. It was actually available almost 7 years ago when it was printed in 2012, and as I mentioned, it's not available anymore as an ebook. You can actually find copies online on Amazon, for example, but they're very, very expensive, almost $100 each, or on eBay as well. However, although I've just mentioned that, a lot of the information is still available on Frank Zane's new book called The Zane Bodybuilding Manual, which I'll talk about later. I haven't actually read that one, but you can actually see the similarities between Symmetry and Zane's Bodybuilding Manual. More on Symmetry. As a bodybuilding fan of the Golden Era and Golden Era legends and whatever they write, including Frank Zane, the book is definitely intellectual and covers, as I mentioned, the esoteric aspects of training, such as the practice of mantra, meditation that Frank uses, and the impact that it actually had not only on his physique during his competitive days, but during his entire life. And in this respect, this actual section, which is part 2, maybe I would say is rather challenging for some people, simply because I mean, for the typical gym rat, they're absolutely not interested in this side of development, the development of the mind, of the soul. But Frank was very deep into it, and he really does talk about a lot of these esoteric practices that he does, as I mentioned, mantra and etc. For a lot of people, this might be all airy-fairy. I found it rather fascinating because I practice yoga, tai chi, meditation myself, so I actually found quite a lot of good information here. And however, this is only this esoteric practice of Frank Zane is only a part of this book. If you look at the contents, and I will show you the contents, it's actually part 2, and it does make a rather significant section of the book, almost 100 pages. It's actually about 60 pages. But the first part, it is gold. I mean, this really is the autobiography of Frank Zane, this first section, this first 120 pages or so, because it really does show you all of his workouts as an example. I find this section enormous value. The book has many of the types of workouts that he actually performed as a novice, all the way to his Mr Olympia contests. And if we can see that here, so we can see that here in the beginning. Here we have really early photos of Frank and his training methods. He goes through his routines, how this evolved as he began to compete in the Olympias, etc. There's so much information in this autobiography, including some hilarious stories as Frank Zane battled for the Olympias as well. It's really funny. It's just the whole journey, really. He also gives a very interesting insight into his own description of Symmetry, which is the very first part of the book. Symmetry, what is it? And he actually talks about, I guess he compares today's bodybuilding to the past, where it's actually to have I really like this message that he conveys throughout the book, that to truly achieve symmetry, you actually it's actually good to have certain flaws in your physique. For example, to have perhaps one arm larger than the other, and not just have flaws in your physique, but and by flaws I actually mean for the shape of the muscle to be slightly different, because it actually adds to asymmetry. And asymmetry is very important to achieve a symmetrical look. These are Frank Zane's own words, by the way. And you can see that he's not, for example, here in a pose, in a classic pose, he's not standing straight. For example, he defines symmetry. This is bilateral symmetry, perfect symmetry. And when you compare it to the other image, you can see, for example, that his deltoid on this side is more developed than on this side, and he talks about these differences, that one calf is larger than the other, but and that's the reality of a true bodybuilder, that there is some asymmetry. But further, to actually give an aesthetic symmetrical look, that posing should be asymmetrical. That is one of the major things that he talks about. And he compares basically the aesthetic era of silver and golden era bodybuilding to today, in that so many bodybuilders pose exactly the same way, and it just looks like a line of bodybuilders all doing the same thing, and therefore there is no expression, and it doesn't look beautiful anymore. And I have to agree with him there. You can see that he's got slightly one leg in front. He's tilted his body here. He's looking slightly over at an angle. So all of this asymmetry in posing is very important to achieve this symmetrical look. That's one of the things he really emphasizes in this book. And the last part I also find really valuable. The last part of the book is, I guess he really details how to, he actually gives detailed instruction to the types of workouts, specific details on how to achieve a better silhouette, detail in certain muscle groups, and symmetry, how to refine the physique, so to speak. He tells of specific workouts and principles he used, for example, for developing definition in his back and in his thighs. He actually talks about this in a lot of detail. And for example, how he developed mass in his calves to counterbalance the overdeveloped thighs that he had in the beginning. And for example, he also gives detailed information as to how Arnold, who when he came to America, he had overdeveloped biceps and chest, and basically everyone complained to him, or pointed out, you've got no triceps, you've got no shoulders, you've got no calves, you've got no thighs, and how he actually overcame this because Frank Zane was actually Arnold's first partner in the US. And he talks about all these different principles and methods of training, etc. It's really, I find, really valuable. Then that's in part 3 at the very end, where he talks about even specific exercises to counter, I guess, your weaknesses. And here they are. This is all this section here. And he actually recommends the use of all these specific isolation exercises to really bring out a really beautiful silhouette in your physique. I really like that section. That's part 3, symmetry specialization. It's excellent. So as I mentioned, this book is actually out of print, and its sister book at the time when Symmetry came out was actually called High Definition Body. And at the end of this book, it actually gives us a quick summary of High Def Body, which I haven't read yet, but it basically has to do with more about posing. Of course, he talks about his esoteric practices like meditation, but he does go in depth into nutrition, especially into nutrition. And if this book talks about all his bodybuilding principles in regards to training, the sister book, High Def Body, talks about nutrition. And these two books are not available anymore. I will obviously do a review on High Def Body when I read it. But for those of you that are interested in learning more about Frank Zane's particular principles as explained in Symmetry, you can actually find them still in Zane's bodybuilding manual, which is essentially a synthesis of Symmetry and High Def Body. And you'll see the same thing here. He actually talks so much in the beginning here about all his initial training methods, just like he did in Symmetry. So if you have missed out on this book, and I know many of you have, you can still find a lot of that information in Zane's bodybuilding manual. It's mostly is exactly the same, and I would say that this book is even more enhanced, is that it gives you more photos, more workouts, more information overall. Anyway, back to Symmetry. Of course, I gain nothing by telling you to purchase Zane's bodybuilding manual. I know that just a lot of you will feel, I guess, a little bit misfortuned that you can't actually purchase this book because it's rather expensive and it's basically out of print. But as I mentioned, for those of you that want to read the kind of information found in Symmetry, you can find it in Zane's bodybuilding manual. What did I think about this book? I've told you I think it's a great read, and I definitely give it a double thumbs up. I really did enjoy it. There's so much information here that I would definitely like to incorporate myself. Anyway, that's it from me. This is the first review on Frank's books that I've actually done, and I will be continuing to read many more of his books. It gets a thumbs up from the Golden Era Bookworm, and yeah. Hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't to the Golden Era Bookworm. Thank you for watching. Leave me your comments. And yeah, if you'd like to support my work, please donate via PayPal, become a patron, or visit my website, www.goldenerabookworm.com, where you can find old school courses and books from the golden, silver, and bronze era of bodybuilding. That's it for me. This is the Golden Era Bookworm. Hope you enjoyed this book review. Bye for now.